Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the archives. I have been expecting you. Darth Plagueis the Wise is one of, if not the undisputed most intelligent, most tactical, most powerful, and unquestionably one of the most powerful Sith Lords in all of Star Wars lore. Darth Plagueis' in-depth studies into the midichlorians made him a nigh unstoppable foe, rivaling beings such as Mace Windu, Grandmaster Yoda, and even some have speculated the prodigal knight Revan, a being whose power surpassed even the mightiest of the ancient Sith. Despite this though, Darth Plagueis still died, and in the Darth Plagueis novel, we can clearly illustrate how Darth Plagueis was actually killed and murdered by his sneaky apprentice. Palpatine used tactical genius and strategy in order to defeat his master, playing on his previous quotes, using his eidetic memory and his immense strategic output in order to be able to defeat his master without initiating any formal combat. And it is personally this reason why I personally believe Palpatine's plan that ended up killing Plagueis eventually worked so well. So today we're going to be exploring a possible idea, and that possible idea being how Darth Plagueis was actually killed, and how Darth Plagueis may still live on as a Force ghost, a drifting, lingering essence today. The excerpt picks up from the Darth Plagueis novel. Darth Plagueis has just drunk a huge amount of Sullustan wine, extremely expensive wine, celebrating Palpatine's ascent into chancellorship, with Palpatine musing that he would kill the Mon Sith Lord before he ever achieved galactic power. Now, let us proceed. A look of sinister purpose contorted Sidious's face. Again, his eyes darted around the room, and the dark side whispered, "Your election assured, the sun god's absent, Plagueis unsuspecting, and asleep." He moved in a blur. Crackling from his fingertips, a web of blue lightning ground itself on the mum's breathing device. Plagueis' eyes snapped open, the force gathering him like a storm. But he should have stopped short of defending himself. This being who had survived assassinations and killed countless opponents merely gazed at Sidious until he struck him. Plagueis was challenging him, confident that he couldn't be killed, and in denial he was slowly suffocating. He might have been simply experimenting with himself, actually courting death to put it in its place. Momentarily taken aback, Sidious stood absolutely still. Was Plagueis so self-deluded as to believe he had actually achieved immortality? The question lingered for only a moment. Then Sidious unleashed another tangle of lightning, drawing more deeply on the dark side than he ever had. "Let's go over the second part of the speech, shall we?" he said, smoothing his tousled cloak. "You useless old fool." With a snarl, he threw his cloak back behind his shoulders and leaned towards Plagueis, planting his palms on the low table that was now puddled with spilled wine. It was Higo Damask as Darth Plagueis, who came to Naboo, determined to suck the planet dry of plasma, and set the Trade Federation up as its overseers. It was Higo Damask as Plagueis, who then set his sights on a seemingly confused young man, and with meticulous skill, manipulated him into committing patricide, matricide, fratricide. Darth Plagueis, who took him as an apprentice, sharing some of his knowledge but withholding his most powerful secrets, denying the apprentice his wishes as a means of controlling him, instilling in him a sense of murderous rage, and turning him to the dark side. Sidious stood to his full height, glaring. It was Plagueis who criticized his early efforts of his apprentice, and who once choked him in a demonstration of his superiority. Plagueis, who denigrated him in private for hiring an inept assassin to carry out the murder of Senator Kim, and yet who allowed himself to be tracked by the Grand and nearly killed by mercenaries. Plagueis, who had turned away from the grand plan to focus entirely on himself in an egotistical quest for immortality. Plagueis, who had the determination to criticize his apprentice for having inculcated too much pride in his assassin he had trained. Plagueis, who had then turned his equally powerful apprentice into a messenger and a mere intermediary. And Plagueis, who watched it in secret while the apprentice tasked a true intermediary to reveal the reborn Sith to the galaxy. Sidious paused, then in Durdician, Plagueis the Wise, who in his time truly was, except at the end, trusting that the rule or two had been suspended, and failed to realize that the most powerful Sith Lord the galaxy had ever known, and yet who forgot to leave a place for himself, whose pride never allowed him to question that he would no longer be needed. Still struggling for breath, Plagueis managed to stand, not only to collapse back on the couch, knocking over a statue from its perch. Sidious moved in, his hands upraised to deliver another bolt, his expression archaic, enough to chill the room. A A full storm gathered over the couch, spreading out in all concentric rings, to wash over Sidious and hurl objects to all corners. In the centre of it, Plagueis' form became anthropomorphic, then resumed shape as the storm began to wane. Sidious's eyes bored into the Mun's. How often you said that that old order of Bane had ended with the death of your master. An apprentice no longer needs to be stronger, you told me, merely more clever. The era of keeping score, suspicion, and betrayal was over. Strength is not in flesh, but in the force. He laughed. You lost the game on the very first day you chose to train me, to rule by your side, or better still, under your thumb. Teacher, yes, and for that I will be eternally grateful. But master, never. Sidious peered at Plagueis through the force. Oh yes, by all means, gather your midichlorians, Plagueis. He held his thumb and forefinger close together. Try to keep yourself alive while I choke all the life out of you. Plagueis gulped for air and lifted his arm toward him. There's the rub, you see. All the ones you experimented on, you killed, and brought back to life. They were little more than toys. Now you get to experience it from their side, and look what you discover, in a body that has been denied air, in which even the Force is failing. Your own midichlorians can't accomplish what you're asking of them. Hatred stained Sidious's eyes. I could save you, of course, return you from the brink of death as you did Venomous. I could retask your body to repair the damage already done to your lungs, your heart, your aged brain, but I'll do no such thing. The idea here is not to drag you back at the last moment, but to bring you on death's door and shove you through to the other side. Sidious sighed. A tragedy, really, for one so wise, one who could oversee the lives and deaths of all beings, except himself. The Mun's eyes began to bulge, his pale flesh too sonatic. You may be wondering, when did he begin to change? The truth is that I haven't changed, as we have clouded the minds of the Jedi. I clouded yours. Never once did I have any intention of sharing power with you. I needed to learn from you, no more, no less, to learn all your secrets, which I trusted you would eventually reveal. But what made you think that you would need you after that? Vanity, perhaps? Your sense of self-importance? You've been nothing more than a pawn in a game played by a genuine master, the Sith Ari. A cruel laugh escaped him. Reflect back on the past few years. Assuming you have the capacity, Yingchor, Dorvala, Eriadu, Maul, the Nemoidians, Naboo, an army of clones, the fallen Jedi Dooku. You think those were your ideas, when in fact they were mine, cleverly suggested to you so that you could feed them back to me. You were far too trusting, Plagueis. No true Sith can ever really care about another. That has always been known. There is no way but my way. Sidious's eyes narrowed. Are you still with me, Plagueis? Yes, I detect that you are, though barely. A few final words then. I could have let you die in the Forbisi district, but I couldn't allow that to happen when there was still so much I didn't know. So many powers that remained outside my reach. And as it happened, I acted wisely in rescuing you. Otherwise, how could I be standing here and you be dying? I actually thought that you would die off on Sojourn, and you would have had if the Hutt hadn't tipped you up to Varuna's scheme. And you also turned out for the best. Even after all you taught me, I might not have been able to take the final steps to chancellorship without your help in manipulating the Senate and bringing the interplay with various and sundry allies. If it's any consolation, I'm being honest when I say that I could not have succeeded without you. But now that we've won the race, I have no need for a co-chancellor. Your presence, much less your unnecessary counsel, would only confuse matters. I have more to do at the risk of discovery might not allow me to do, while I execute the rest of the grand plan, growing an army, fomenting rebellion, and fabricating intergalactic war, corralling the Jedi and catching them unawares. Rest easy in your grave, Plagueis. In the end, I will be proclaimed Emperor, the Sith will have their revenge, and I will rule the galaxy. Plagueis slid to the floor and rolled face down. Death rattled his lungs, and he died. One Warden 4D started to approach, but Sidious motioned for it to stop. We're going to have to find you a new home and a new body, droid. 114D looked once at the Mun, then at Sidious. Yes, Master Palpatine. Sidious moved to the window, then turned outside to take a close look at Plagueis. Then, after a long moment, he returned to the window and pulled the drapes aside. His spirit soared, but briefly. Something was shading his sense of triumph, a vague awareness of a power greater than himself. Was it Plagueis reaching out from the far side of Vex to vex him, or was the feeling as a mere consequence of apotheosis? Outside, the summits of the tallest buildings were gilded by the first rays of daylight. What an end to this character! Darth Plagueis the Wise is truly one of the most mysterious characters in all of Star Wars lore. But we still haven't gotten to the primary part of the video. Why did Darth Plagueis, in my mind, allow Palpatine to kill him? Personally, it goes back to the line where Plagueis was challenging Palpatine. He was cocky, arrogant, He believed that he had learned all he needed to know about the midichlorians and that he could live eternally. He believed that he could not die. He believed that he was an immortal entity, a virgin in the Force like Palpatine. While he could never be as strong as his apprentice, as strong as he could be, he could still be formidable. But in the end, Palpatine would always rise up. Personally, in Star Wars canon at least, I believe that Plagueis is still around. I believe his spirit is still imprinted on the galaxy, just waiting to find a cloned body. Personally, if Plagueis was to return, I would really like if they incorporated the Exegol storyline from The Rise of Skywalker. I know The Rise of Skywalker is very controversial, but the Exegol storyline is truly one of my favourite elements of the entirety of the Skywalker saga. I would personally love it if all this time the Sith Eternal cultures had actually been crafting a body for Plagueis, and not for Palpatine, with Palpatine just inhabiting the body, and then sensing his immense dark side connection, decided to go along with the ruse that they had. With Plagueis being denied a body, Plagueis is now dead, but his spirit still lives on, or at least in my opinion. Well, my friends, what did you think of this video? Are you enjoying these types of videos that we are doing on the Mon Sith Lord Darth Plagueis? Goodbye, my friends. This is where we part ways. I'll see you in the galaxy far, far away. And if we've learned one lesson here, is that never drink Sullustan wine before the night of the election of the Supreme Chancellor.